All right, so buckle up, because today we're diving headfirst into a scenario that's about as high stakes as it gets. We're talking about Ukraine and the possibility of them going nuclear.
Yeah, I'm kidding.
We've got this Substack article that's really got people talking, arguing that if Ukraine can't get into NATO, they might just feel like they've got no other option but to build the bomb.
It's a chilling thought, really.
It really is. And to make things even more intense, we're also
Yeah.
going to be looking at some historical parallels here.
Okay, yeah.
Like, how did Israel, India, South Africa, how did they handle their own journeys to becoming nuclear powers?
Right.
And are there any lessons there that, that Ukraine could learn from today?
Yeah, absolutely. And this Substack piece doesn't beat around the bush. It comes right out and says that Ukraine is in a really, really tight spot. I mean, they're facing an existential threat from Russia.
Sure.
Right. And the article makes a pretty bold claim. They're saying Ukraine could get nukes way faster than most people think.
Oh, wow.
Like way faster.
And they're not exactly subtle about it either. The article's like, forget about Iran, Ukraine could be a nuclear power way sooner than anyone expects.
Right, exactly. The article's point is Ukraine, they're not starting from scratch here.
Right. Oh,
They've already got the brains, they've got the uranium, they've even got the infrastructure.
they've got the pieces.
Yeah, and that's where things get really interesting because they're not just talking about, just building nukes. They're talking about going for a deterrent strategy that's, well, it's a lot like Israel's.
No.
Like that whole, we may or may not have them, but you better believe we'll use them kind of thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. Deliberate ambiguity. The idea is to make everyone nervous enough to leave them alone.
And the article keeps going back to that Israel comparison.
Yeah.
Saying Ukraine is in a similar boat, surrounded by enemies, always worried about getting attacked. They even go as far as to say that someone, somewhere, would help Ukraine get nukes if they decided to go for it. I mean, come on, is that even realistic in this day and age?
Right. Like who would actually risk getting involved in something like that?
Yeah, with all the potential fallout.
Especially with the secret nuclear program, It's a huge gamble.
Huge. And that's where I think looking at those historical examples gets really, really interesting. Because it's not just about can a country actually build nukes, but why do they decide to do it in the first place?
Right.
And then what happens afterward?
What's the fallout?
Yeah, what's the fallout? This proposal we've got, it suggests looking at Israel's whole secrecy thing, India's decision to be like, hey, everyone, check out our bombs. They weren't exactly subtle.
No, not at all.
And then there's South Africa. They actually built nukes, and then we're like, you know what, never mind.
Yeah, they dismantled their whole program. Wild, right?
So bizarre. So it's like we've got this whole spectrum of choices that countries have
A
made.
whole playbook of different approaches.
Exactly. But the million-dollar question is, could Ukraine really pull off something like Israel's strategy today?
Right.
Like in this day and age, with all the technology and surveillance, can you really keep something like that under wraps?
It's a good question. It's a whole different world out there than it used to be, right? The ability to keep secrets, especially on a project that big, it's tough.
It's got to be next to impossible.
I mean, think about it. Even if you manage to pull it off, what happens if the secret gets out?
Oh, man.
What if the world finds out for sure that Ukraine's got nukes?
Yeah.
We're talking about a major geopolitical earthquake.
It's like Ukraine's stuck in this crazy game of poker and they're being forced to play a hand they never even wanted.
Right.
And it all comes down to this idea of deterrence.
Exactly. What the Substack article is getting at is, for Ukraine to actually survive, like long term, they need some kind of serious deterrent.
Something that would make Russia think twice, right?
Exactly. Something that would make them terrified to even think about invading again.
And right now, they're hoping that's going to be NATO membership.
That's the hope. But
But
the article's saying, what if that doesn't happen?
what if that door slams shut?
Then Ukraine might start to feel like they've only got one option left. Like nukes are the only way to guarantee their security.
Wow. And I guess that's what makes those other examples so fascinating, right?
Really?
Because, like you said, India, they went a totally different way. They were like, we got nukes, look at them.
No subtlety there.
Not even a little bit. So we've got Israel being all secretive, India making a big show of it, and then South Africa, they build nukes and then they just give up.
It's really remarkable when you think about it. Like they put in all that work, all that risk, and then they just dismantle the whole thing.
It really messes with your head, because it shows just how complicated this stuff is. But for Ukraine, the big question is, could they even do something like Israel, keep it all hush-hush,
Right. Like in today's world.
Yeah, how do you even hide something like that anymore?
Well, and even if you could, even if they manage to build nukes in secret, what happens if that secret gets out?
Yeah, because that's a whole other can of worms.
Oh, absolutely. Think about the reaction. If there was, like, absolute proof that Ukraine had nukes, I mean, that would
Right,
be,
insane.
it would be a complete and total game changer.
Yeah.
And not necessarily in a good way.
No, definitely not. The Substack article kind of skips over that part, what happens if the world finds out. But those consequences could be huge.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, we're talking about sanctions, countries cutting them off.
And then there's Russia. You think they're just going to sit back and do nothing?
Right, like that's just going to make things worse.
Way worse. And we can't forget, this isn't some kind of game, right? These are real-world consequences we're talking about.
Absolutely. Real people would be affected.
And not just in Ukraine.
Yeah.
This could have ripple effects all over the globe.
So it feels like we're talking about like this fork in the road, right?
Yeah.
And one path, it's totally uncertain. And the other, it's terrifying.
Yeah, that about sums it up. And that's why this research we were talking about, it really digs into those other options, you know?
Okay, yeah.
Like, what if there's another way for Ukraine to keep themselves safe?
Okay, like what?
Like, what if instead of going nuclear, they just went all in on, like, building up their regular military?
So basically become so strong that Russia wouldn't even, like, dream of attacking again.
Exactly. Deterrence through, well, just being too tough to mess with.
So more tanks, more planes, more of everything.
And not just more, but better, you know? Like getting those really high-tech weapons from their allies, those super advanced defense systems, making it clear that invading would be a really, really bad idea.
A 21st century, don't even try it kind of thing.
Exactly. But, and this is a big but, that also means diplomacy has to be front and center.
Right, because talking is usually better than, you know.
Blowing each other up.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure, for sure. So the question is, can we de-escalate this whole thing? Can we find some kind of way through dialogue to, you know, to build a lasting peace? And not just peace, but real security for everyone involved.
That's the hope, right. But it just seems, I don't know, it seems like a long shot sometimes.
It's definitely a challenge.
Because if it doesn't work, if Ukraine feels like they've got no other choice, like they're backed into a corner, they have to do something drastic to survive, and nobody's helping, what kind of message does that send to other countries in a similar spot?
It's a scary thought.
It really is, because then what? Everyone starts building nukes.
Right, exactly. It throws the whole idea of global security out the window, and it brings up this, like, really unsettling question. Which is, are we really heading towards a world where nukes are the only thing that matter?
Wow.
Like, the only way to guarantee your own survival is to have the ultimate weapon.
It's a sobering thought.
It really is. And I think sometimes we forget that this isn't just, you know, some theoretical debate we're having.
Right.
There are real people caught in the middle of all of this.
Millions of them.
Yeah. And their lives are on the line. So when we talk about Ukraine and this choice they might have to make, it makes you think about what really matters, you know?
What are our priorities as a global community?
Exactly. Because if a country like Ukraine feels like they have to choose between existing or, you know, playing by the rules, then maybe, just maybe, we haven't built a very good system.
So where does that leave us? I mean, that's a pretty bleak outlook.
It's definitely a lot to think about. But I think the Substack author was right about one thing.
What's that?
Things are different now. We're not living in the same world we were even a few years ago.
So what do we do? How do we make sure we're building a better world, a safer world?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? But I think it starts with recognizing that the choices we make today, they have consequences. Big ones.
For all of us.
For all of us and for generations to come. We can't lose sight of that.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with this. If a country feels like it's got to choose between surviving and being a part of the world, have we really created a world that values peace?